Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day. Before we dive in, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And today's guest is the CEO of Myriad Uranium, a company developing the Copper Mountain Uranium Project in Wyoming, USA. We're going to talk about uranium. We're going to dive into the details on Myriad and what they've been up to. It's Thomas Lamb. Great to have you back on the show.
Great to see you, Jesse.
Well, it's been a while since we had our last discussion, so I want to start by asking what the main themes and trends are that you're currently watching when it comes to the uranium sector and nuclear energy that you think more investors should be paying attention to.
Well, I think everybody's following the headlines, so I'll just briefly mention the U.S. seems to be really focused on uranium and the nuclear question. I think leadership in the White House, et cetera, is being pushed, made aware. Some of them are, they've got some smart people there who already understand. China has been thinking nuclear for a long time. They are building reactors like crazy. They have been thinking about AI for a long time because of the embargo on NVIDIA chips. The U.S. and the West get the most advanced chips, and China's stuck getting the sort of older generation chips. China has been working really hard to build their own chips, and they've just done that. I think that now I don't know all the detail. I don't fully understand what they've done, but the headlines are that China has achieved a great leap forward, and you combine that with their growing nuclear fleet. I think they're capable of really accelerating their build out. Because, the U.S. administration is reacting to that. There's already the climate. There's already we need to build out U.S. nuclear. We need to produce domestically. There's already all that, but I think the China thing has hit them between the eyes, and now I think the U.S. The funny saying is the U.S. always does the right thing after exhausting all the other avenues, and I think that's going to happen here. I see the U.S. course correcting and really leaning into nuclear to support everything but AI too. I think there's a panic that's set in if I don't hate to use that word, but I think they realize now they have to. And are they going to be able to keep up with China? Let's see. But I love the fact that the race is really on now. You've got AI, data, nuclear, and you see that with all these executive orders. We'll talk more about that. But so there's that. I also, Budinskoye, this big Kazakh joint venture between Kazakhstan and Russia, is short on acid and they're struggling. That's a big producer. I think that's interesting. There's DASA in Niger that maybe that's going to get financed and be on its way. That's interesting, relevant. People keep talking about small modular reactors, the effect of that. Some people are very enthusiastic about that in terms of demand for uranium, future demand for uranium. I don't know what to make of that, but that's neat. And then spot price, what's going on there? Are utilities going to have to step in here and start buying, not just to, and others have to start buying, not just to basically supply the uranium that they need, but also replenish inventories back up to their long-term mean inventory level. Because I understand that some of them have been depleting down below their, sort of their target inventory. So that means even more buying. Now, those are some of the things I'm looking at. There's a lot more too.
Yeah, great summary. It's not only nations and countries that are embracing nuclear, and as you mentioned, the administration right now in the U.S. is very pro-nuclear. We're going to discuss that in a moment. But Amazon, Google, and others have pledged to support the tripling of nuclear energy capacity by 2050. I'm going to read a little snippet from an article in Reuters. It says major companies such as Amazon and Google on Wednesday signed a pledge to support the goal of at least tripling the world's nuclear energy capacity by 2050. Shale company Occidental and chemical giant Dow also added their names to the pledge. Very interesting. And of course, we know back in December, more than 20 countries also pledged to triple nuclear capacity by 2050. And we've got these massive corporations buying in as well. I mean, I can't see any clearer sign that the future is nuclear here. What are your thoughts there?
I agree. I agree. I think the politicians they're slow, but they will catch up, and they're being influenced. Uh, Everybody's waving their arms, screaming from the hilltops, "Get on this!" You see this, I think, with the executive orders. The executive orders, I view them as uh, we should take them as a indicator that the administration is on this and that they're aware and that they're pushing. Everything is so much more complicated than just signing an executive order, of course, and saying go. But yeah, it's a great sign. I think that U.S. is going to course correct. I think they're going to figure out how to get things moving and approved at the various levels. One of the things about executive order is it's just the federal, but you know, we are there on the ground. There's state authorities you have to deal with. How do they feel about things? And you've got local folks too, and others. You're not going to get around all that. And then there is litigation, always litigation risk if you do go too fast. So there are various things that need to be solved also, but everybody's on it now. Uh, the big tech companies are very influential, as we have seen, very influential at the White House. And so that is great. Um, uh, if you're in the sector, take a lot of comfort in that. Even if you are whichever side you sit on with regard to Trump and et cetera, the pressure is on there at the White House, and they will feel it and they will react. And so I think it's game on here. We, as with everybody in the sector, in the ecosystem, we have our people that are closer to power, closer to understanding, what they're talking about right at the top, and then also with utilities, et cetera. I see 2026 being an incredibly exciting year. I'm hoping that the second half of 2025 is, spot price starts moving up. We see some really real action. I think this is the time for everybody to get really positioned. If you're going to, if you're buying into the thesis, which I think everybody should, now's the time.
So, current Secretary of Energy in the U.S., Chris Wright, seems intent on building up nuclear energy capacity in the country. And as we've been discussing, the Trump administration has declared an energy emergency, and we've seen an executive order signed. The executive order is called Immediate Measures to Increase American Mineral Production. We've already seen some companies get their permits put on a fast track plan, including Energy Fuels' Roca Honda mine in New Mexico. How could this change the game when it comes to the uranium industry in America, and particularly in regards to Myriad uranium?
Okay, so I'm going to take this opportunity to mention that our second project is in New Mexico. So people who have questions about New Mexico, is this a great jurisdiction? It is. They just got their permit there. There's some other great companies that are operating in New Mexico. That's a great jurisdiction. You also mentioned that Occidental signed on to this pledge to dramatically increase nuclear energy, triple it, et cetera. Occidental drilled some of our project area in New Mexico too. There's a link there. I just sort of wanted to mention that. So this is great. As I mentioned, I view these executive orders as indicators that the administration is on this, and that they are fully behind uranium and nuclear. It is a little more complicated. Big projects have if you're going to permit a mine or you have some big thing you're doing, you're a big company and you have you're at an advanced stage. I think it's much more helpful, these executive orders, and enables you to get on these fast tracks. I think for smaller companies like ours that are exploring, we're a little more beholden to state and local stakeholders, but it does help us too. So the way it works, if you're on BLM land, that's federal land, for the smaller companies, we're interacting with the state regulators too, and so we want to make sure we do everything in line with what they require also. But God, it's very exciting for the big companies, especially. It's exciting for us because it's pulling everything up into accelerated paths, enthusiasm, financing. Um, we just know it's the energy and the excitement's building, and the administration's behind all of us, and there may be some. Let's see if the U.S. Geological Survey. Okay, so whether uranium is a critical mineral or not, it's been indicated as to be critical in these executive orders. Does it make it so from a legal point of view, from a Department of Defense financing uranium projects, et cetera? Let's see about that. But things are all pointing in the right direction. That's why I think you have the executive orders. Then it's one way to do it is to sign an executive order, then to figure out all the regulation and how the laws all need to be adjusted behind that. I have a feeling the U.S. is going to get itself organized, and that's why I think everybody should be sort of getting positioned now, because they'll have it sorted hopefully within the next 6 to 12 months, and then things are really going to be on fire. That's my view.
Well, despite everything we've discussed, sentiment in the sector is fairly low. Interestingly, I started investing in uranium equities back in 2020. At that time, the narrative was, well, within 5 years, this is going to be in a raging bull market. I recently did an interview with Trader Ferg, who's heavily involved in the uranium sector, and he said he's like most investors. He thought that we were going to be in a raging bull. He said, and I quote, he expected prices to be doing silly things by now. However, I'm seeing the fundamentals actually continue to improve. Everything we've discussed shows that sentiment should be far more positive than it is. Why do you think that disconnect exists?
Well, combination of factors. The world, lots going on in the world. Investors, it's a lot. So much of the investing is so. Yeah, so much investing is done via ETFs and funds, and there's lots of managers that are risk averse or protecting downside, et cetera. There are small allocations for the smaller companies in these funds, but of course, everybody's happy to invest in Apple and et cetera, and maybe in Cameco, et cetera. I think we are in a situation where it's like a spring or coiled steel that's just getting better and better and better the longer everybody waits to invest in the juniors. Why they haven't, why people have turned away and investing in other things or holding cash or whatever is it is a little bit of a mystery from my point of view. On the other hand, you have all sorts of strange things happening in the world politically, wars, of course, Ukraine, Russia. You have politics in the U.S. is, it's not totally stable, and it's a little bit wild, right? And what do people do when they see that? They kind of they just maybe wait a little bit. So that's why I say that the U.S. does get itself sorted out typically. I think once things are a little more stable, which I think is coming. You already see that with tariffs. Tariffs were jacked up against China, and then now there's been a retreat. That's very sensible. I think the same thing is going to happen in lots of these spheres where reality gravity hits, and so they'll get themselves sorted out, and then people will take a deep breath and I think step into the uranium sector. It is the place to be as far as I can fathom. Gold is very interesting too, of course, but that's a whole nother kettle of sushi off on the side. Just a little, if you don't mind me asking, what are some of the explanations you're hearing as to why junior equities in uranium space have not moved up really strongly?
Yeah, well, even the developers, things like NextGen, things like Denison, et cetera, have they're doing okay, but they have not, that we saw quite a frenzy when the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust came onto the scene, and we haven't retraced to the prices that were achieved since then. up until this point. But in terms of explanations I've heard, I mean, a lot along the lines of what you're saying, there's so much market uncertainty right now. So a lot of people are just doing what's worked in the past, which is pile into these big tech stocks, these big tech names. People are distracted by things like Bitcoin, looking at the returns that you can get there. And I also think that the uranium sector is just still quite obscure to your average retail
Totally.
investor on the street. Like I have some
It's
friends who are
very
more,
nichey.
yeah, I have some friends who are more generalist investors. And when I talk to them about uranium, they have no clue what I'm talking about. And then when I explain the thesis to them, they actually their eyes kind of perk up, like, wow, that's really interesting. So I think part of it is the fact that the knowledge isn't out there. The mainstream financial press rarely talks about it. And then the fact that, like you said, everybody's kind of chasing the shiny object of the day at this point in time. So there's a lot of different factors at play here. But one thing I do want to talk about is the spot price. This is another interesting factor when it comes to uranium that confuses a lot of investors. Gold, silver, copper, oil. We have a operating futures market where minute by minute you can get an up-to-date price. With uranium, there's a futures market that's basically broken. It doesn't really work, so you can't use that to track price. You have the spot price, which is what most investors follow along with, but it's very thinly traded. It's a very liquid market, accounts for only approximately 10%, maybe on a big year, 20% of annual volume when it comes to the uranium market. Yet it is the most frequently reported, even though it's not reported like a futures contract would be. It's the most available piece of price information that investors can get access to. So they look at that as an indicator of the health of the overall sector. There's a term price, but the term price also is not perfect because a lot of these long-term contracts have NDAs attached to them. So there's no real accurate gauge on there's a chart with a term price on Cameco's website, for example, but is that really accurately reflecting what's going on? So just when you put that in front of your average investor, they're like, how am I supposed to figure this out? Right. So what are your thoughts there on the way that uranium is priced and how investors track it? Is this an issue and perhaps an obstacle when it comes to the uranium market in your view?
Yeah, definitely. It's very hard for outsiders to understand. And even somebody, I've been in it now for a few years. We have an advisor. His name's Edvards Smirnovs. He was a banker. He was CEO of Uranium One. He's an advisor to major companies, the majors, regarding the uranium sector and dynamics. And very smart guy. Really has the insights. I've asked him this exact question several times, and and then I tell him what I think regarding spot, just to take spot. And he comes back and says, well, it's, and his answer is that there's a lot more to it. And it's a bowl of pasta in terms of what's going on there. You have the question of who participates in the spot and why, and what is the psychology of the utilities, the buyers, what these are humans, what puts them at risk as individuals, right? It's do they care? Do the utilities care? How much do they care what the spot price is? You know, um, why did spot race up in the first place? Uh, was it because it should? Was it because it made sense at the time, or because you had physical funds, you had private equity, you had other kind of participants that have stepped into the ecosystem that weren't necessarily producers or utilities, just other types of participants. And then you have the opacity of the term price, exactly as you say. It's opaque. It's confidential. They're contracting in ranges, $60 to $130, depending. And what does that really mean? So it's a tough one, but it's what we've got. I think we're going to see spot. So to head to the question about spot, I think we're going to see it keep ticking up, because my understanding is participants that have to are stepping in, and they're really going to have to start stepping in soon to fill gaps. Um, they're going to need the uranium, and they're going to have to step in and start buying. So I wish I had the answers, but I think we all wish we understood it. Am I wrong? What have you been hearing on your end regarding spot? It's it's a it's a very interesting question that doesn't have a clear answer.
Yeah, no, I totally follow you there. I think in a way it gives those of us who are willing to deal with that complexity a little bit of an advantage, because there's so many factors that are unknowable, and we're aware of that. I think that was a great answer in terms of how complex it really all is and the motivations of the different people involved. It's like, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome, as Charlie Munger once said. I think that's something that not enough people pay a lot of attention to. But in terms of the spot price, the way I see it is that it really drives investor sentiment. So it, in some ways, it doesn't, the realities don't matter as much. It doesn't matter as much that only 10% of the market on average involves spot. It doesn't matter so much that it's like a handful of people who are trading in many cases, and they have very different incentives than a utility, for example. They're trying to flip pounds to make a few dollars here and there. All these sorts of things don't necessarily matter as much because all of the investors look at spot and it drives their sentiment in a way. So it kind of by proxy ends up mattering more than perhaps the reality of the situation.
That's
Maybe
right.
that's a bit of a convoluted answer, but that's kind of how I see it. Let's shift to discussing Myriad Uranium, specifically how the company fits into the picture when it comes to uranium in the US and globally. Last time I had you on was August of last year. So, for new viewers, could you maybe give us an overview of the Myriad Uranium story and also highlight the progress you've been making since our last discussion?
Great. I'll start with just saying, or by saying, an analyst, East Coast analyst, Wall Street analyst, or uh, you know, uh, uranium specialist, recently told me that he views Myriad Uranium as the call option on the uranium sector in the United States. First of all, we were flattered and really happy to hear that, but I'll explain why. So, um, Myriad has a 75% earnable interest, kind of option interest in the Copper Mountain Uranium Project in Wyoming. We acquired that a couple of years ago. We're at 50% ownership. We're $1 million Canadian spend away from being 75% ownership. We do have a path to 100% if needed, by paying fair market value for the last 25%. So we're almost at 75%. Copper Mountain, when we did the deal, neither we nor our deal partner, Rush Rare Metals, which, by the way, everybody should take a look at, for the arbitrage between the companies. It's just a fact. Take a look at that, people. It's interesting. Um, neither company fully understood the project. The 43101 said this is a brownfield project and past production during the Cold War. And you're going to need to do a maiden drill program to start getting data on it, unless you can find historical data. During our letter of intent due diligence phase, we acquired a whole pile of historical data from a rancher in Wyoming, and it revealed, like Indiana Jones, opening up the data, 7 giant bins of historical data revealed that Copper Mountain had 117 million Canadian spent on it in the 1970s. We hadn't realized 2,000 boreholes. This is all by Union Pacific Railway's subsidiary Rocky Mountain Energy, in partnership with Southern California Edison. They were going to build a large-scale conventional uranium mine at Copper Mountain, our project. This was going to fuel all the Southern California Edison reactors planned for California in the 80s, which didn't get built because of the 3 Mile Island incident, 1979. Until that moment, till 1979, Copper Mountain was going to be a large-scale uranium mine. Starter resource, 15 to 30 million pounds, depending on cutoff. And then they have all these peripheral, quote unquote, prospects that had seen on average sort of, 3 to 10 boreholes each, and then study of surface expression and other characteristics. And they were going to, in the future, upgrade those to deposits themselves. So 7 deposits plus a lot of prospects. Altogether, they estimated that they have among them over 65 million pounds of uranium. So that is our baseline, what we have at the project. But that is only to a depth of 500 or 600 feet. They never drilled deeper, almost never. They drilled a few deeper holes, but out of the 2,000, just a few. So we have this very cool project. Copper Mountain, Wyoming. It was going to be a large-scale conventional uranium mine. On top of that, it has big blue sky prospects. They very rarely assayed their drilling, tended to probe, and they noticed disequilibrium, meaning the probe didn't always get an accurate reading of the uranium content when they checked with assays. But then 3 Mile Island hit, they were gone, along with everybody else in the US. So here we are. We picked up this project. We did 34 holes of drilling in the September, October, November of last year. We got fantastic probe results. As our advisors suggested to us, Union Pacific have been, we believe, very conservative with their estimates and their reporting, although it was internal, during the 1970s. And this is because of this disequilibrium issue. The probe picks up other things, not just uranium, daughter products of the uranium decay. And if uranium's moving in the system, then it, it's not firing off as many neutrons, et cetera. Or in fact, if you use a gamma probe, different issues. But just to keep it simple, disequilibrium was an issue back then, so they used a very conservative approach so they wouldn't get caught out by disequilibrium. We've gone in and we drilled 34 holes. We've reported on 28 of them. So we reported the probe data on all 34, and they were excellent. We had grades up to 8,060 ppm, lots of intercepts over 1,000 ppm, 2,000, 4,000. Fantastic results and much higher grades than we expected. We also drilled a couple deeper holes, but one in particular down to 1,600 feet, and we encountered mineralization at about 1,500 feet. We're incredibly excited about that. Very interesting. Maybe I'll explain why in a little bit. Then we sent those intercepts for assay. We've been getting those back. We've reported on 28 of them. We are getting a 50% grade boost on high grade intercepts where it's 1,000 ppm or higher. We have lots of them. Grades are actually 50% higher than we thought. And so this, if you look back at what Union had and what they thought back then, you imagine this sort of transforms the project potentially. And think about their estimates, think about their grades, et cetera. We're getting big grade boosts on high grade stuff. Across all the drilling, anything at 200 ppm or higher, we're getting a 24% grade bump when we assay. So let's see what happens with the last 6 holes. It's going to, the last 6 holes include our deeper hole. As a CEO of a major told me several months ago when he called me about the results, said, we're watching you. He said, wow, and if on top of your good results, if you have mineralization that's deeper across the project, that could crack the project wide open and make it very, very, very exciting indeed. We staked some new land. We doubled our land position several months ago. That's one of the things we did. So we have a really big land position. We want to throw a blanket over all the key areas. And there's an area off to the west called Railroad that Anaconda drilled years ago, and they found mineralization at 900 feet. Again, Union drilled to 500 or 600 feet. Anaconda found at 900 feet. That's on the same structure, we believe, that goes across to where we drilled and found mineralization at 1,500 feet. That makes it potentially very interesting if they're linked. As Jim Davis, one of our advisors, who was general manager of Union's exploration work in the 1970s, said, there could be big deposits hiding in plain sight at Copper Mountain, and including unconformity style, i.e., I don't want to be hyperbolic, but we're very excited, Athabasca type potential. Of course, that Athabasca it's just an amazing spot. So, but that's what we're talking about, and we have that in some historical documents too, discussion of that from the 1970s. So Copper Mountain has turned out to be a very exciting project. I know that once the world understands it and uranium is back on the upswing, we're going to get credit for that, and we'll be on our way. So that's Copper Mountain. Of course, we have our New Mexico project too, which we acquired.
Yeah, let's talk about the New Mexico project, because you recently released news that you've expanded your land position there. Walk us through those details and how you plan to capitalize.
So we have a chairman, Simon Clark. He's a superstar. He was CEO of American Lithium that went up from small market cap up to 1.3 billion or whatever it was, and he's Yeah, we're just very lucky to have him as chairman. He and I were partners on with a couple other gentlemen on M2 Cobalt, which we sold to Jervois, and that which also went up to 1 point something billion, and we that was a really good deal for us. Simon and I work very well together. Uh, I'm so glad he's with us. He helped us acquire this New Mexico project called Red Basin. I'll spare you the details of how we managed to get it, but we're delighted we did. It's a near surface high grade project. Now, strictly from securities law point of view, we're not supposed to just throw out high grade because that's not what you do. But the grades are 1.7. Well, I should maybe talk about ppm. 1700 ppm to 3100 ppm near surface in the top 450 feet. It has indicated resource of 500,000 pounds. It's a high category. Inferred resource of 1.5 to 6.5 million pounds. These are historical non-43 101 done in 2012, and with expansion potential. And it's a really nice project. Sandstone, generally sort of roll front hosted. The entire basin, the area around us, but including our area, is thought to have 40 to 45 million pounds. And we've been expanding. And what we've done is we've gone to local people who were involved in the drilling, the historical drilling from several decades ago, and we've asked them to guide us. So we've acquired the areas with their guidance that have seen about 800 of the just over 1,000 historical boreholes in the basin. And where do people drill? Where the uranium is. So we're excited about what's to come. It's a really good project. It's in a great jurisdiction, New Mexico. We're quite a ways south of the Navajo, or north of us. People who understand New Mexico and the history there know that there was an issue with the Navajo and a spill a long time ago. And so we're in a really good spot in New Mexico. We're a little ways south of Premier American's New Mexico project, so people can look at it. So that's Red Basin. We did a great deal to acquire it. People are wondering, why would you acquire a second project when Copper Mountain is so good? Well, we couldn't resist this. Our entry cost was very, very good. We were very opportunistic in jumping on it, and it's got real historic pounds in the ground that are very nice, high grade, near surface.
So what are the plans moving forward for the New Mexico project? Are you more honed in and locked in on Copper Mountain at this point in time? Are you going to be doing some additional drilling at the New Mexico project? How do you plan to kind of divide your attention between both projects?
Yeah, we're going to have to wait and see just a little bit. We do need to do some geophysics in New Mexico. That's the next step. So within the next 9 months, we'll be doing some geophysics down there, some mag and radiometrics. And then let's see, we'll make a plan from there. But inevitably, it'll involve drilling down there and bringing the historic resource current. And yeah, there's more to come there. I'll have to save that for a future episode and news releases and such.
Great. Well, I want to talk about the ownership structure of Myriad. It's 27% insider ownership, which is very large, and 76% retail. Obviously, as investors, we love to see that much skin in the game from management. You're personally the second largest shareholder, I believe. Is that correct?
Okay, so that information has now evolved, and we actually have a lot of funds and institutions in the deal now, and so we have some bigs, and I how that got broken out, I'm not sure. I don't think I'm the second largest shareholder anymore. We do have some funds in there. We have the Swiss Uranium Fund came in. We have funds from Toronto, East Coast US, and elsewhere that are in. And these are well-known funds. I've already told the world that the Swiss Uranium Fund is in. We have Stephen Detells, who's one of the big backers of Global Atomic, and he's a very famous uranium investor. People can look him up, Stephen Detells. He was involved in some of the biggest deals last cycle. We have some prominent funds from Toronto, and their principals are in. So things have changed. We don't have such a big retail ownership anymore. It's still very important, but lots of sophisticated investors. Stephen Detells himself and some funds around him, they came in last year after a 2-month due diligence process. So they got their experts into our data room and really looked at things, and then it was recommended that they invest. So people have followed in, sophisticated groups have followed in behind that. So things have evolved. I don't think I'm the second largest shareholder anymore, but I am a significant shareholder, and I put my own money in. I've written probably $500,000 to $575,000 worth of personal checks out of my checking account at 25 cents, 30 cents, 40 cents. I don't have cheap stock, and so I'm in this, and I'm aligned with shareholders. That's the way I like to do it. And so, but I am a significant shareholder. And the way we do it too, I don't like to speak too much about, compensation for executive suite and et cetera, except when I'm told we are all very underpaid relative to the average in the sector, but we make sure we make up for it with equity compensation. So stock options and equity, other equity comp. So that's how we do it too. We're not in this for the cash compensation. We're in this for the equity. So I thought I'd mention that. Yeah, we're probably the low. Our chairman Simon and others always tell me to make the point. We consider ourselves among the very lowest paid executive suite in the business, but we want equity comp because we're in this for the exit. By the way, so everybody knows, I don't build mines. My job is to build this up, and either it'll transition to another management team if we're going to be extracting, or achieve a liquidity event. And I do think we're very well positioned to be acquired at some point. That's my personal view.
Yeah, I love that clear plan. And those funds coming in, obviously a very bullish indicator for the company. Before I let you go, is there anything we haven't yet covered, anything you want to emphasize to potential shareholders when it comes to Myriad Uranium?
This disequilibrium issue at Copper Mountain, very interesting. I encourage people to look at our recent news releases. Just click and take a read. You'll see that we tend to put the key points in the highlights on the first page. Just imagine, okay, well, actually, there is one thing. And so this is connected to that. It turns out, we know this from the edges of our intercepts. So we drilled boreholes last fall. We probed them. The probe said, okay, there's lots of uranium in this interval. So we sent not just that interval, but a little bit on either end to the laboratory. In some cases, the ends where the probe did not pick up much uranium, just a little bit, turns out there's lots of uranium there on assay. Well, what's coming is we're going to send core from our diamond holes and chips from our RC holes into assay where we got low uranium values. We didn't think it was worth sending that stuff in. It may be that actually those intervals, those areas, are very uraniferous, full of uranium. If that's the case, imagine if Union Pacific had known this historically, that these areas where the probe didn't detect much uranium, turns out have quite a bit of uranium in them. That changes things, if you're doing an open pit or even any kind of mining. And of course, we have, as people know, we have the southern half of our license area is probably more amenable to in situ recovery, and the northern half is more conventional. Anyway, if this disequilibrium applies across the project area, and we are going to get the same bump, 24%, 50% on the high grades areas, and the areas where the probe did not pick up much uranium, if those areas have a lot of uranium that is not picked up by the probe, it's transformational. I'm supposed to, the geologists always tell you, be conservative. Don't make any promises about how all this goes. But as management, we see all this and we're very excited. It's more, there are possibilities here that are really, really great. It's a big project. Has the potential to be one of the biggest projects in the United States. Over 65 million pounds. U.S. Geological Survey, 1982, they said 200 million pounds potential at Copper Mountain. And that's a lot. Neutron energy, 2006, 2012, quote unquote several hundred million pounds potential at Copper Mountain. So I want to get that in there. It's exciting stuff.
Great. Well, Thomas, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm going to put links in the description below to the Myriad Uranium website, as well as social media profile for people who want to follow along with the company. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge on the uranium sector and Myriad.
Thanks, Jesse. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to next time.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.